Hi, everyone. This is Rohit from United Mastery, and I'm excited to have Nick Desai, who's the founder of Renee, which is a transformative digital health system specifically designed for older and underserved Americans uh, 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 to coordinate, communicate, and connect all aspects of the healthcare. Nick was earlier the CEO of Heal, where he expanded the company to 10 states, raising over $165 million in investment capital. Nick earned his bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering from UC Irvine, and he's done his MS in electrical engineering from UCLA. A big thanks to Amit, guy from Tau Ventures, for the introduction. Welcome to the show, Nick.
It's great to be here, Rohit. Thank you for having me. Excited to speak with you and your audience.
Awesome. So you've had an interesting journey. You want to into second startup. How did you get into this crazy world of startups?
This is actually my fifth venture-funded startup, my sixth startup overall. And for me,
Wow.
it's in the blood. My father is an entrepreneur, was an entrepreneur. He's retired now. My grandfather had his own business. And so honestly, I was 16 years old before I knew that you could do something other than just start your own company. So it's all I've ever wanted to do. I relate. I enjoy leadership. I enjoy the challenge of creating something out of nothing. So after I finished graduate school and worked for about a year, I started my first company, and I'm here. I am 30 years later.
Interesting. And you built Heal and you raised $165 million. What were some of your learnings from Heal, and why did you sell the company?
So look, the learnings from Heal were, I can't, I mean, I could talk for the whole hour about how much I learned from building that company.
Right.
So prior to Heal, I had obviously done three venture funded startups, and I knew a lot about the venture capital process, and I knew a lot about business development and corporate clients, and that's really where my focus had been, is B2B and all of those things. But with Heal, we had a product. Heal's a doctor house call. It's like Uber to get a doctor to come to your house, um, except it's covered by insurance. So it was a revolutionary concept, and it was the first product I had that had magnetic appeal to consumers and to investors. Right? It was not something that I ever had to explain to anybody. All I would say is it's an app for doctor house calls. It's covered by insurance, and people would say, "Yes, I'm in." And I remember we had very early on, from our very before our founding, really, one of the investors we had the opportunity to meet is a world famous singer and musician named Lionel Richie. Right,
Right.
you've probably heard
Yeah.
of him. And I remember sitting with him, and I'm sitting at this hotel, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm sitting with Lionel Richie. And he says, "So what is this about? What's the idea? Why am I here?" And I just said, "It's Uber for doctor house calls." And he said, "I'm in."
Hmm.
Literally, that was the pitch. Right. And whether it was insurance companies, whether it was corporate clients, we had 75 corporate clients at Heal. So Hulu, Netflix, Fox, Activision Blizzard, Google, eBay, on and on and on. We had 25 insurance companies, from Medicare to Humana to Aetna to United Healthcare. We had 300,000 patients. It was an intuitive concept. And so Heal, the challenge for me, as opposed to my previous startups, which was about driving growth and pushing and being unrelenting to get one more person, convince one more person, was actually was managing growth. Right.
Mm.
The single
Okay.
most important lesson was, how do I grow effectively? How do I spend my money wisely? How do I appropriately attract patients? How do I make sure the unit economics work? How do I add people, right? We grew from two, three, myself and my wife, who founded the company, to a group of 5 people, to 50 people, to 100 employees in a period of 2 years, right? That's a lot of hiring, and
Yeah.
the infrastructure for that, and we launched Heal in numerous states. And so scaling a business and operationalizing something to work at a large scale was really the most important takeaway I took from Heal. What I've always believed, and what was true about Heal, I hope what's true about Renee, what's true about my companies before that with FitOrbit and others, is the power of an idea, right? That a good idea requires incredible great execution, perseverance, persistence, and all those things. But fundamentally, you have to have a good idea. You have to have something interesting. And Heal was an exploration of the power of an idea that went really to scale very, very fast and sustainably. And it's still, Heal is, just to be clear, Heal's now raised, when I left, we had raised $200 million in investment capital for the company. And the company's still around and doing very well, and will, we think, eventually be acquired. But when I chose to step down in March of last year, about 6.5 years after running Heal, because the acquisition path was the most likely path, and a number of large companies were looking at it, including our largest investor, Humana, which is a huge healthcare company. And in that context, I knew I didn't want to be a employee at a large company. It's not my nature. So it was a good time to take a step back, transition to new management, hand over the reins, and to go from there.
Interesting. And the cost of rising for chronic conditions in the US. Why do you think that is happening, and why is the medical structure so why are there so many rising costs, especially for the US healthcare?
Look, again, a topic I speak about. I do my own podcast, and I hope you don't mind the shameless plug. It's on Slice of Healthcare. It's called Nick's Notes, and
Sorry.
but and I talk about this extensively. And again, I could talk for hours. But the U.S. healthcare system is an interesting quagmire, right? It's a $4 trillion healthcare system. To put that in perspective, the entire economy of India is $3 trillion, right?
Yeah.
So we spend more on healthcare in the US than the entire economy of India, right?
Right.
The entire economy of every country in the world except Japan and China, frankly, I think is those are the only two countries that have an economy greater than $4 trillion. The number one reason for the costs in the US is bureaucracy.
Mm.
When the US introduced insurance and private employer-funded insurance, right? So the history of US healthcare, not getting into the whole history, is it was a largely cash-pay system. Then Medicare was created. Then a tax break was created for employers to offer healthcare to employees. And that was in the 70s. And by the 80s and 90s, virtually all working people had, and certainly now, all working people have healthcare health insurance from their employers. Health insurance, not Medicare, but private commercial health insurance, is a fundamentally inefficient initiative. And the reason is because insurance as a model does not work for healthcare. Insurance is a business that works when a lot of people pay into a system that very few people will use, and everyone's incentives are aligned. Okay. So let me give you an example. Fire insurance, okay, works. I don't want my house to burn down.
Right.
And the insurance company doesn't want my house to burn down. Life insurance works. I don't want to die. And my insurance company doesn't want me to die.
Right.
But health insurance doesn't work because healthcare is something we should use. Healthcare is like education. The more we provide it, the more we create a foundation for prevention, right? Educated people commit less crimes, do more this, do less drugs, all this stuff. Similarly, healthcare cannot be thought of as something that you should only use once you get really sick. It should be thought of as something you use to avoid getting really sick. A doctor-patient relationship, a therapist-patient relationship, a relationship with a nutritionist, the tools that help you give the ability to lead a healthier life. Yes, anyone can get cancer or a car accident, but short of those things, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, the main chronic disease in this country, can be reduced in scope substantially by a more preventive approach to healthcare, such as the one they use in Japan. Japan has the highest life expectancy in the world. The average Japanese person lives 5 years longer than the average American, and they spend only 40% per capita of what we do on healthcare. So because they have a prevention-oriented approach that starts from day one. So fundamentally, the insurance model for healthcare is broken. And what that does is it creates an incentive for insurance companies to not pay for things, which means there's a fight between the doctor, the patient, and the insurance company as to who's going to pay. That creates a bureaucracy, and that's $1 trillion of healthcare costs in the US healthcare system, right? That $1 trillion alone should be gone, right? That if we went to a single payer system where the rates were mandated and the government paid, it would be every single thing that everything was, these things were covered for everybody. We would get rid of that bureaucracy and we could save $1 trillion on healthcare. That now there are many, many other reasons that go beyond that and data points about how healthcare costs have risen without a rise in whatever, but I'll leave you with this data point on this. Between 1990 and 2015, and at 25-year period, the number of doctors practicing medicine in the United States on a per capita basis increased 0%. Same number of doctors to population ratio. Over the same period of time, the number of people working in healthcare bureaucracy increased 5,500%.
Oh, crazy. You have built Heal as well as you're looking to build Renee along with your partner. How do you get to work with your partner in launching products, and how do you separate your personal and your professional life?
So the answer to that question, Rohit, is Renee and I are husband and wife, and we've been husband and wife for 14 years. We've started a company together 8 years ago, and now with Heal, and now this one, Renee's a physician, I'm an engineer and serial entrepreneur, right? My wife I started 3 companies before Renee, and I had business partners in each one. The best business partner I've ever had is Renee, and because there are some fundamental things about a good husband-wife relationship that help a business. One is I trust her completely, and she trusts me.
Yeah.
The second is we have completely different skill sets. Renee's a physician. She's clinically oriented. She has attention to detail. She's good at HR and operations and things like that. I'm an outward facing person. I raise the money. I get the deals. I think of strategy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. That's point number one. The second point is that we're good at conflict resolution. I don't know if you're married, but if you are, you cannot be husband and wife successfully without learning how to resolve differences and conflicts, right? Sure. And the conflicts and the stress and the issues we deal with are around marriage or our parents or health issues or our 3 children. We have 3 lovely children together. Those are way higher stakes issues than a company, right? A company is very important, but it's not more important than my children, right? Mm-hmm. So once we've dealt with those issues, we know how to resolve conflict, right? So, and in terms of keeping our work and personal life separate, it happens naturally because we have 3 beautiful children, right? We get home, either sometimes we work in the same place, sometimes we work in a different place, geographically, sometimes she works from home or I work from the office or whatever the case may be. But the moment we walk in the house, there are 3 kids eager to play with us and who want our time and attention. And so it instantly, pulls us away from work, but also we've actually become really good at it, right? We talk about work during work hours. And when we're at home, we don't talk about work, right? We talk about our family. And she and I will spend an entire day working together, leave here if the kids are with the grandparents or something, and go out and have dinner and enjoy ourselves and not talk about work. We're not only business partners and parents together, we're also best friends.
Got it. Super, super interesting. And you have a high lot of people. How do you define high performance in business today?
Look, I first of all, I think that definition of high performance has evolved and changed because the definition of employer and employee have evolved and changed. I've been an employer for 30 years and across 5 or 6 companies, and I've seen people of all shapes and sizes and ages and demographics and educational backgrounds. But in the last 2 to 3 years, I've seen changes at a faster pace, more significant changes than I've ever seen, because the tide has shifted from the employee should be thrilled they have a job and the employer has the upper hand, to the employer should be thrilled the employee shows up to work and the employee has the upper hand. especially when there's low unemployment, that, and a lack of, not enough very highly qualified people, right? That exacerbates the problem. Now, the reality is that there are plenty of companies and uber wealthy people, super multi-billionaires in every country that have, whether it's Mukesh Ambani in his $1 billion house, right?
Yeah,
In a city that his house is 2 kilometers from the largest slum in the world, Dharavi, right?
true.
Maybe build a $500 million house and help these people get out of the slums, right? Or Bezos or Musk and their crazy ideas to buy Twitter or send people to Mars instead of feeding people or planting trees, right? The uber wealthy have given entrepreneurs a bad name. Most of us are actually decent, hardworking people who care a lot about the people who work with us, right?
Right.
And it doesn't look like that when Amazon warehouse employees are struggling without healthcare and Jeff Bezos has $250 billion, right?
Yeah,
The optics of that and the reality of that are very bad. But the reality is there needs to be a balance, right?
right.
Employees, this is a business relationship, and employees should be expected to work and deliver performance commensurate to the wages they earn. And employers should be respected to be honest, ethical people who don't take advantage of their employees and hoard all the proceeds and the winnings, but share it with their employees, right? This can only exist in a symbiotic balance, right?
Right.
Um, so why is that an answer to high performing employees? Because today I look at a high performing employee as someone who I always feel like they're delivering reliably the value that I'm paying for, but ideally delivering more value so that I proactively feel the need to increase their compensation, to more aggressively reward them, to make them a bigger part of whatever it is I'm doing. And I think that dynamic can exist at any level of employee, right? I have people who work at this company who have degrees from Oxford and Cambridge, and I have people who work at this company that have no college education, right? And
Right.
across that spectrum, it is possible to have someone who is willing to learn, to go above and beyond, that shows curiosity and commitment. And showing that to your employer is not mean that your employer is taking advantage of you. It means that you are showing your employer that you want to be more and do more. And then your employer, it's up to your employer, it's up to people like me to reward you, to share, to let you share in the rewards of what you are helping create it.
Got it. Super interesting. And it's a follow up on performance. When do you get to decide when to let go of someone, and how long do you give underperformers to see that they're performing well in the company or not?
You know that this is a really, really tough question, right?
Right.
There's a general saying in any startup that says hire slow and fire fast,
Right.
right? Um, and I generally do believe that, which is, be very careful about your hiring decisions and hire people only that you're very sure about. And if you sense that someone's not going to work out, right, make the hard decision earlier in the process, right?
Right.
um, because you're not doing anyone any favors if you don't make the hiring decision early, right? Um, it, but the corollary to that point is that what you have to be able to recognize early on, and what I'm really proud of that I've done in my career, is recognize people who have limited skills or experience right now but have incredible upside potential. There's a young lady who works for us at this company right now named Sarah,
Okay.
right? And I won't say her last name, but she came here to do one specific job. It was handling patient phone calls and things like that. And she has grown in less than 6 months to do business development, to do marketing, to do a number of different things that are allowing her to grow with the company in a really exciting way. When I was at Heal, I had a young man work for us named Vikash, and he started as an intern while he was still at UCLA and stayed with us through his computer science education after he finished his degree, while he went to Cambridge for his master's, came back full time after, and grew. I have a young lady who worked for us named Heather, who learned enough and always went the extra mile. And today she started her own startup, right?
Right.
So finding out that someone is not going to cut it or fundamentally does not have the commitment or the skill set or the abilities or the desire to deliver on even the most uh, basic workplace expectations is someone you should cut right away. But if you find someone, if I find someone, certainly my belief is if I find someone that has what's I call high ceiling, which is if you push them, if you give them opportunity, if you give them training, if you support them with education, the tools they need, they can grow into a really high level contributor. That's the best kind of person, right? Is
Right.
someone you grow with and they grow with you. And it's a great relationship for both sides.
Correct. Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree on that. And yeah, I want to talk about a product, product launches, and especially when it comes to B2B enterprise companies, if they launch the first product, what advice would you give to them on when should they release the second product?
Look, I think the answer to that question is really dependent on the company, the space, the market segment, the revenue model, whether they're B2B, SaaS, this, that, whatever, right? But fundamentally, I think that the first focus should be to find the MVP that is a saleable product, whether it's B2B, D2C, whatever. This is a widget people are willing to buy. I always use this example famously. When the iPhone came out,
Right.
there were already phones, millions of virtually every phone that was sold at the time, flip phones, Nokia phones, they had cameras in them.
Yeah.
Most of those phones allowed picture messaging, as in I could take a picture and send it to somebody as a message, right? The iPhone famously did not allow picture messaging when it first came out. It didn't. There was no picture message. There was no app store. It was the internet and the browser, and this was the experience. It was this heavy, clunky device compared to what we're used to now.
Yeah.
But it had a killer user interface, the touch screen, a way people liked, and it had a front-facing camera, so I could take pictures of myself, right? And that spurred a revolution where we see where Apple is today in the world, right? The world's most valuable company. So the world's most valuable, sorry, not I think Aramco is more valuable, but the world's, most valuable tech company by far, right? That So I don't think the rush is to offer features or product iterations. It's to build something that sells, to sell it, and then to build what the customers who are buying it want, so you can both serve your customers better, your existing customers, and go get more customers. So I don't think the question is when to launch a next product. I think the question is, have you launched a product that serves patients well? And if so, not patients, sorry, customers. In our case, that's patients, but customers well. And if so, is that product doing well in the marketplace? And if so, what is the correct next step?
Correct. And especially for founders, who have who launch a product, and what advice would you give to them on when to stop working on a product if it is not at the right product market fit, and how do you know when it is not working?
Yeah. So the answer to that question is, look, I'm always of the opinion of get it out there as quickly as possible. Don't over-represent what it does. Don't lie about what it does, but get it out there, right? The fastest you can get a product in the hands of real people. I had an investor at Spark Capital in my company at FitOrbit that always used to say, the best product is the one that most people use, or the one that makes the most money, right? I always use this example. One of the most indispensable tools in my work life is LinkedIn. Okay. It's how I keep track of contacts, this, that. It's my living address book of where knowing where, and I look up anyone. I don't even get resumes anymore. I just say, ask me for their LinkedIn profile, right? And I see where people have worked and where they went to school and decide if I want to interview them and meet new people, whatever, all this stuff. LinkedIn is a horrible user experience, right? It's, and there are tools that are way cooler and easier to use, but they don't have any real sustainable value. So people don't use them, right? So and by the way, LinkedIn's the only social network that has ever figured out how to get its users to pay money because it
Right.
has real value. People find jobs on LinkedIn, people find employees on LinkedIn, so it has value, right?
Right.
So I think that, there's always a context of make it better, over engineer, perfect. There's no such thing as perfect, because what you think is you could spend 10 years building a product and the first person who uses it is going to think of something you didn't, right?
Right. Correct. And you've been an Indian immigrant, and you have worked in the US, and there's some really high profile entrepreneurs as well as CEOs of big companies from Indian origin. What are some of the advantages or disadvantages of being an Indian in the Indian tech, in the US tech ecosystem?
Look, I think, I think that the generation of Indians that came here before me,
Right.
my parents, my in-laws, that did Indian people in America and Indian people in the world an incredible favor, right?
Yeah.
When Narendra Modi gave a speech at a joint session of Congress to the senators a few years back when Trump was president,
Yeah.
he talked about Indians are scientists and doctors and CEOs here, and he made this joke, right? And we've even given you a few spelling bee champions, right? If you know, the U.S. spelling bee winners are always Indian kids,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and whatever, right? So for 3 decades now, there's a general perception that if I'm talking to an Indian person in America, they're a smart person. They're a doctor, lawyer, and engineer, right? There's comedians who make fun of this stereotype now, but it's generally true. And generally, they're smart, hardworking people. They own 50% of the motels in the country, and they own it, right? They're business owners. They're hardworking. They're smart. They're decent. They show up. They're reliable. They don't complain. But then over the last 2 decades, what's happened in venture capital and startups and in the tech world is the CEO of Google, Microsoft, IBM, Twitter, Adobe, venture partners at I mean, not just Amit at Tao, who's fantastic, but Tao's a smaller fund at Kleiner Perkins, at Sequoia, at Andreessen Horowitz. I could go on and on, name a VC, and there are prominent Indian partners. So there's an entire ecosystem. And so the advantage is, first, being given benefit of the doubt that you are organically a smart person by virtue of doing it. Second, there are tons of other CEOs, right? And so if you're building a health tech company and you don't know anything about health tech and you're starting for the first time, I can't tell you how many Indians have reached out to me saying, "Hey, I'm a fellow Indian. I'm trying to start," and I always find time to help them. Right?
Mm.
Not that I don't help people who aren't Indian, but I will. It's hey, it's a fellow Indian brother or sister
Mm.
that I want to be helpful to, or write to Vijay Kedar at Tomorrow Health, or Manav, I forget his last name, at Memora Health, or Sid Vishwanath is it Sid? I can't remember his name. At TruePill, or the Hemant Taneja at Comure, or General Land. There are so many people that you can write to that you might just get an email opened where you wouldn't before. So I think that the context of being an or Indo-American entrepreneur in the United States right now is all upside. It's just I can't think of a better position to be in, because you have an ecosystem of entrepreneurs, of venture capitalists, of big tech CEOs, of people now at the FDA and at the FCC and in various positions of hell. The Vice President of the United States is half Indian, right? So
Yeah.
you have all of those positions, right? And again, it's not to say let me be clear. I have a lot of VCs invested in Renee, and I had a lot invested in Heal, and an overwhelming majority of them were not Indian people, right? But they thought I was smart because, in part because I was an Indian person, smart and hardworking and committed and whatever, all that stuff, right?
Right.
Um, but if you are starting out for the first time, having somebody who's from the same place in the world or speaks the same language, especially if you have an accent or you're new to the country or whatever the case may be, can be incredibly helpful. And all you need is that one person that pushes just a little bit for you that can be so invaluable in in getting started, right? So I think that ecosystem, that network, that reputational power is phenomenally valuable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think Indian Americans who've been in the US have done a great job. And Nick, you onto your sixth startup, you raised a lot of venture capital. What makes you so driven? What makes you keep going on and building new companies?
Look, I always say that the being driven is two things, right?
Right.
Three things. First is the immigrant work ethic, right? You come. The second is that, when I was a kid in India, all those advantages notwithstanding, when I was a kid here in the U.S., where my family's Jain, and I used to be strict vegetarian, and today everyone's a vegetarian, and every celebrity is vegan or vegetarian, and especially here in California, everyone just, if you eat something, it's weird. Not if you don't. Gluten-free, vegetarian, vegan, this, that, no dairy. But back then it wasn't like that. And I was the only vegetarian kid in my elementary school. I was the only Indian kid in my elementary school, right? So I got picked on and I got bullied and made fun of. And they call it bullying now. It was called picked on then, or just being made fun of. And even the teachers sometimes got in on it. And so you become tough, and you get a chip on your shoulder, and you want to prove something to the world, and you want to prove that I'm better than. And I think another part of it is the, showing my parents and the challenge I give my kids, which is, if you are born of opportunity, if you are born into an environment, and this goes for anybody, Indian or otherwise, of privilege. My parents had food, they had money, they had education, they could send me to school, they could, get me a car, all this stuff. It's an obligation to do something, right?
Yeah,
And the last is what I consider really the most important reason, which is just, there are 1.4 billion people in India, right?
yeah,
And there are 7 billion, 8 billion people on the planet. An overwhelming majority of them will never even get the chance to think about what they want to do, because they are too busy doing what they have to do, right?
right.
To pay the bills, to put food on the table, to stay alive. They're fighting that fight in the majority of the world. And so if you're one of those few people that gets to not only think about what you want to do, but have the education to do it, have the opportunity to do it, have the mental faculties and the intellectual gifts to do it, if you don't go change the world, you're honestly taking all those blessings and crapping all over them, right? I honestly don't see how someone can have gifts of opportunity and intellect and not go want to do something incredibly special. And I'm 52 years old, and I have kids now, and my challenge to my kids, and my challenge to all the younger Indian generation and Indian Americans is, build on the reputation we built for you and our parents built for us, right? If Indian people aren't on the Supreme Court and don't become president and don't continue to stay CEOs and, do well, I think it would be a damn shame, right?
Yeah,
And you can't take it for granted. You have to work with the rigor and the intensity that comes of being born of opportunity, in my opinion. So, and I like it. And the last reason I should say is why I do it every day and why I still do it, because we're financially blessed at this point, is bec- because I enjoy it, right? Like, I can't think of what else I would do that I enjoy this much, right? I get
right.
up in the morning, and I've never taken a paycheck since I was 23 years old. I haven't taken a paycheck that I didn't sign for myself. That's a pretty cool feeling.
Yeah, yeah. So super interesting and very inspiring. And I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
My favorite business book is probably, God, there's so many good ones. But one I really like is called The New Thing,
Hmm.
which I think is by Jim Clark, if I remember correctly, right? The New Thing is a book, Silicon Valley. It's by Michael Lewis. The New
Okay,
Thing.
okay, oh, okay, got it. We'll put that in the show notes. And if you could go back in time when you started building Renee or he? What is one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
Well, Renee is a relatively new company, right? So it's hard to go that much back in time. But I would say in Heal, the one thing I would have done differently is uh, focus on growth within one market more than growth by launching in new markets, because the operation became so much more complicated because we were in 11 states where we could have built the same size business just in California or just even in Southern California, and that would have been a much more successful strategy, I think, in retrospect.
Got it. And do you have any favorite online tools, example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
I honestly think Zoom and LinkedIn, which I mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two things. I mean, Gmail's fine, but there are other email apps, and Slack. I don't really get that. Slack is just text messaging on my computer, right? It's
Right.
simple. To me, it's not indispensable. People tend to love it, but to me, it's Zoom, LinkedIn and Zoom, right? This is how I do
Yeah.
my work. Is
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love these products. We'll put that in the show notes. And Nick, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Renee?
If people want to visit more about Renee, they can just go to the website, renee.com, renee.com. If they want to connect with me, I'm nick@renee.com, nick@renee.com. It's super simple.
Got it. We'll put that in the show notes. Nick, thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was great.